Well, isn't this a coincidence? I'm your host Yusuf, and these are 10 most wanted criminals caught by mistake. Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's run into some criminals. Number 10, a chain of stupidity. In the year 2000, a woman named Betty Lee was found executed in the middle of the desert in New Mexico. A man named Robert Fry and an accomplice managed to kidnap Betty and drove her out to the desert to end her life. On the way back from the crime scene, Fry's car got stuck in the dirt. So, Fry called his father, James Fry, to come and wrench him out with his pickup truck. Only one issue here, his dad also got stuck in the dirt. Now they had to call a pickup truck to get the both of them out of the mess. They called Floyd Robinson. Floyd drove his tow truck all the way into the desert of New Mexico, set up his professional equipment, and pulled the two cars out. Just kidding, he got stuck too. There were now, somehow, 3 cars in the middle of the desert that were completely stuck. They did the only thing they could think of and called another tow truck. Here comes Charlie Bergen. Charlie was on the end of his rope that night. He already had a bad night so far and had to drive out into the desert to unstuck 3 idiots. Shortly after driving to the scene, his wife called him and Charlie wasn't enjoying her nagging. He had bad reception and got frustrated at the entire situation, so he threw his phone into the sand and got the 3 others out of the desert. Charlie's phone was found near the scene of the crime and he was called in for questioning by the police. Charlie Bergen then recounted the story to the police, which led the police to follow the string of imbeciles back to the first guy, Robert Fry. Forensic evidence linked Fry to the body of Betty Lee and several others. Fry ended up getting stuck in the bin this time. Number 9, bad park job. In June 2011, a young woman named Lauren Giddings was reported missing, so a pair of detectives pulled up to her apartment to start investigating. They found absolutely no trace of Giddings, but unknowingly they had already solved the case. When they parked, they did so in front of a row of trash cans. When the garbage man arrived to collect said bins, he couldn't get to the bins because of the cop car, so he left without grabbing the bags. Giddings' body was found in the uncollected trash later that day. In fact, her butcher was just a few feet away from the cops at the time. A local media station conducted a random interview with one of her neighbors, Stephen McDaniel. It was a pretty normal interview up until the media station reported live that Giddings' body was just recovered. McDaniel had been showing concern for his neighbor up until they reported this. The guy started being visibly uncomfortable about the interview from then on, and that put him on the radar of the police. Enough forensic evidence was discovered to link him to the crime, which he pleaded guilty to. Funny enough, McDaniel was about to take his bar exam in hopes of becoming a lawyer. Number 8, the son of Sam. Summer, 1976. New York City is terrorized by one of the most infamous Terminators of all time. Over the course of the next year, the unidentified man carried out a series of random shootings, which led to the passings of 6 people and the wounding of 7 others. He taunted the police and the media with anonymous letters, referring to himself as the son of Sam. Here's one of his letters. I am deeply hurt by your calling me a woman hater. I am not, but I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I'm a little brat. When Father Sam gets inebriated, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up to the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drink blood. Go out and execute, commands Father Sam. Behind our house, some rest. Mostly young, abused, and slaughtered. Their blood drained, just bones now. Papa Sam keeps me locked in the attic too. I can't get out, but I look out the attic window and watch the world go by. I feel like an outsider. I am on a different wavelength than everybody. The man turned out to be a postal employee named David Berkowitz. His motive? He said his dog was possessed by a demon and commanded him to execute people. In the early morning hours of July 31st, 1977, Berkowitz parked his car in a Brooklyn neighborhood. He walked several blocks to shoot his last 2 victims before returning to his vehicle and driving away. At some point during this series of events, a pair of patrolmen noticed that Berkowitz's car was parked in front of a fire hydrant and ticketed it. Later on, someone was walking their dog, normally, at 2 in the morning when they noticed a man sprint to their car, which had a ticket on the windshield. The woman reported it to the police and they traced it right back to Berkowitz. Number 7, stolen property. In 1997, a South African woman gave birth to a baby girl named Zephany Nurse. In a bizarre turn of events, Zephany Nurse was abducted from the hospital by an unidentified woman, disguised as a nurse. Nearly 18 years went by without any sign of Zephany. By that time, her mother Celeste had 3 more children and one of her daughters, Cassidy, was starting high school. Cassidy soon became close friends with another girl at her school. The two hit it off almost instantly like they were long-lost sisters. You see where this is going. Once Cassidy's father noticed the amazing physical similarities between the two girls, he contacted police. DNA testing soon revealed that the older girl was in fact the missing child. Zephany and the woman she didn't realize was her kidnapper had spent the past 17 years living only a few miles away from the Nurse family. Number 6. Parrot Patrol. In 1942, Max Geller, the owner of the Green Parrot restaurant, was shot inside his establishment. There were around 20 witnesses, but nobody wanted to come forward. There was one witness willing to snitch, however. A large green parrot who, not coincidentally, lived at the Green Parrot restaurant. When police questioned the bird, it exclaimed, "Robert! Robert!" The investigation went nowhere for a year, but eventually a detective figured that something about the parrot's testimony didn't quite add up. The bird had been trained to learn the names of frequent restaurant guests so that he could greet them at the door, which actually sounds like a pretty sick gimmick. What if the parrot was saying Robert? That's a plot twist even M. Night Shyamalan would reject for being too stupid. But the cops checked into it anyway. They discovered that the Green Parrot did indeed have a regular customer named Robert Butler, and that Butler had conveniently left town right after the shooting and was now living in another state. It should be noted that at this point, the police had less than no case, because in the state of New York at least, the testimony of a parrot is ridiculously dumb. But Butler must have had some real respect for the integrity of that bird, because upon being told that he had been figured out by Geller's parrot, he admitted to the crime immediately. Number 5. The search for the wrong person. On November 21st, 1990, Unsolved Mysteries featured the case of Nylene Marshall, who vanished in 1983 while picnicking with her family near Helena, Montana. It was assumed that she had been abducted. As a result of the broadcast, hundreds of viewers called the telecenter with possible sightings of Nylene. One of the callers was a school official in Vancouver, British Columbia. They said that Nylene may be living in the tiny community of Point Roberts, Washington, under an assumed name. Every day, a girl named Mary Ann Kelly was driven to school in Vancouver by her father, Robert William Kelly. School officials who came in contact with Robert felt that he was suspicious. First of all, he was difficult to contact. He never had a telephone number where he could be reached. If they asked him for an address, he would say that they were between addresses. School officials were especially concerned about Robert's actions when he would drop off Mary Ann at school. When school would start, she would go into her classroom. He would get out of his car and look into the classroom's windows to make sure she was there. Her teacher was especially frightened by this, and I would be too. After the broadcast, Mary Ann's teachers began to suspect that she was Nylene. School officials contacted the FBI, who put Mary Ann and Robert under surveillance. The agents also reviewed her school records and discovered that they were false. Initially, agents were afraid to approach Robert, assuming that he was Nylene's kidnapper. They did not want to spook him and allow him to escape with Nylene. In December 1990, FBI agents arrived at the Kelly home with a search warrant. They searched the house extensively. Eventually, in a closet, they found a box labeled bathroom articles. In it was a photo album with pictures of Guillermo, Monica, and Rosemary, and Monica's birth certificates. It became clear that Mary Ann was not Nylene, but was in fact Monica. Guillermo was arrested and agreed to surrender himself to Los Angeles authorities to face charges of parental kidnapping. Monica was then taken into protective custody. Number 4. From petty theft to felony charge. On June 2nd, 1985, Leonard Thomas Lake and Charles Chatat Eng were visiting the South City lumber store in San Francisco. Eng was seen stealing a $75 table vise from the store, and when confronted by an employee, he threw the vise into the trunk of a car, a 1980 Honda Prelude. He fled the scene on foot, leaving Lake to fend for himself. The police were contacted and arrived soon after. Lake insisted that he paid for the vise. Meanwhile, the police, when searching through the car, discovered a gun with an illegal silencer equipped to it. Lake used the driver's license of Robin Scott Stapley, who had been missing for weeks. Lake did not resemble Stapley and appeared significantly older, with Lake being 39 years old while Stapley was 26. The gun itself was registered to the real Stapley. The Honda was registered to Paul Costner, and the license plate to Lonnie Bond, both of whom were also missing. Leonard Lake was thus arrested and brought to the police station. He revealed his real identity as well as that of Charles Eng. He then asked for a glass of water and a piece of paper, and then wrote a note to his ex-wife and family before swallowing a cyanide pill he had hidden in his shirt. Lake was rushed to a hospital but was declared passed away and unplugged from life support 4 days later. Law enforcement became very suspicious of his taking his own life, and visited a cabin in Calaveras County that he was residing in. owned by his ex-wife Clara Lynn Balaz. On the property, a dungeon had been built close to the cabin, which upon further inspection contained a hidden prison cell. Scattered around the property, pounds of crushed and charred human bones were discovered, and entire bodies were found buried in the ground. Also discovered were videotapes of Lake and Eng subjecting women to threats and abuse. Lake was discovered to have a fantasy about kidnapping women to keep in his dungeon as his personal slaves in the event of a nuclear apocalypse, in a plan he called Operation Miranda after a kidnapped female character named Miranda in the book The Collector, a book Lake was obsessed with and inspired by. There were possibly up to 25 victims, with several being unidentifiable. Charles Eng was captured around a month later in Calgary, Canada, after yet again shoplifting. He was imprisoned for 4.5 years in Canada for shoplifting and for shooting the security guard who caught him shoplifting. Number 3. Photo finish. On April 5th, 2008, Engla Junkosa Hoagland went missing on her way home from soccer practice in Stjörsund, Sweden. When she did not answer her mobile phone, Engla's mother, Carina Hoagland, went looking for her and found her daughter's abandoned bicycle in the woods. The mother quickly suspected foul play and stated that her daughter did not have the physical strength to dispose of the bicycle in that way. By coincidence, a man was out testing his new digital camera around the time of Hoagland's disappearance, and he took photos of his surroundings, including one photo of Engla Hoagland riding her bike. The man also took a photo of a red Saab 900 following the young girl. Honestly, any Saab driver should probably be on a list. The driver of the car was later revealed to be Anders Eklund. After the photographer stepped forward and showed police his photos, Eklund was identified and consequently arrested. On April 13, 2008, after days of interrogation by experts from Rikskriminalpolisen, Eklund confessed to the execution and disclosed the location of Hoagland's body. During these interrogations, Eklund also confessed to the execution of Pernilla Hellgren. Number 2. Patty Ain't No Saint. On June 16, 1976, Patrick Kearney ended Michael Craig McGee of Redondo Beach. Records confirmed that McGee had a lengthy history of juvenile delinquency. Kearney claimed to have picked up McGee, who was hitchhiking from Inglewood Avenue near Lenox to Torrance. According to the police, Kearney had befriended the man and invited him to attend a camping trip to Lake Elsinore over the course of a weekend. Kearney claimed to have perceived McGee as a potential threat and shot him without warning, after McGee openly boasted of his personal criminal exploits and inquired about the presence and location of burglar alarms in Kearney's home. Later, when interviewed by detectives, Kearney implied that he had destroyed the remains, stating, "I disposed of the body. You aren't going to find him." The victim who ultimately led to Kearney's arrest was John Otis LeMay, whom he removed from the world on Sunday, March 13, 1977. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on that same day, LeMay had told a neighbor he was going to Redondo Beach to meet a man named Dave, whom he had met at a local gym. This was in fact David Hill, who had given LeMay the address to Kearney's home. Hill was absent when LeMay arrived, so Kearney invited him in to watch television until Hill returned. Without provocation, Kearney impulsively reached for his pistol and shot LeMay in the back of the head. Kearney later dismembered the corpse and dumped the remains in the desert. When his execution spree was at its zenith, Kearney's odd tendencies were largely undetected. A local grocery store owner named Jerry Stevens did, however, note that Kearney was frequently purchasing butcher knives after examining them and inquiring about the quality of the steel. Stevens also described Kearney as a loser with an eerie sense of quiet about him. Kearney's supervisor at Hughes Aircraft referred to him as a model worker though. Number 1. License Plate Patrol. Rifkin committed his first execution on February 20th, 1989, executing Heidi Balch in his home in East Meadow. He then dismembered her body, removing her teeth and fingertips, putting her head in a paint can which he left in the woods on a golf course in Hopewell, New Jersey, disposing of her legs further north, and dumping her remaining torso and arms into the East River around New York City. On March 5th, 1989, Balch's severed head was discovered on the 7th hole of the golf course. On April 8th, 1989, Balch's legs were found in Pequannock Creek near Jefferson Township, New Jersey. Her remains were not identified until 2013. It was assumed that Rifkin executed 16 more women during the next 4 years. He was implicated in Balch's execution after his arrest in 1993. Investigators determined in 2013 that Balch and the woman he described as his first victim were the same person. Rifkin picked up Tiffany Brashani, an intimate worker who was working on Allen Street in Manhattan, on June 24, 1993. Tiffany was with her boyfriend, punk rock musician Dave Rubenstein. Rifkin told Rubenstein that she was going to be returning in 20 minutes. Rubenstein called the police with a description of the 1984 Mazda pickup truck that Rifkin drove, after Tiffany failed to return. On June 28, 1993, state troopers patrolling Long Island Southern State Parkway noticed the pickup truck without a license plate. After pulling Rifkin over, they found Brashani's body under a tarpaulin. He was found guilty of 9 counts of second-degree execution in 1994 and sentenced to 203 years up to life in prison. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.